Hi, everybody. I'm Cheryl Klein. I'm the editorial director at Lee and Low Books, and I'm delighted to be here today with Jing Jing Tsong, who is the illustrator of this lovely book, If I Were a Tree.
Hey, good morning, Cheryl.
How you doing?
I'm really good. I'm happy to see you again.
Yeah, and it's early for you, right? It's like you're out into the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah,
Right?
it's about, I had time for my coffee. So I'm good.
It would be cruel to ask you to do a webinar before the coffee is up. So yeah. So so today we're going to talk about, like I said, If I Were a Tree, and how you came to illustrate this book, and all the cool things that are inside it, because you really built a lot of neat work into this book. And actually, now that I'm talking, I'm realizing probably we should share a little bit of it with the people, with attendees, before we get into our back and forth. So if you don't mind, I'm going to share the screen and then read a little bit of it.
Okay.
Yeah. So here it is. You should be able to see my screen here. And can you see my screen?
Yeah, the image is
The title
ghosted. Yeah.
Oh,
There we go.
Okay. So yeah, we're starting with the title page here, and then if I were a tree, I know how I'd be. My trunk strong and wide, my limbs side to side. I'd stand towering tall, high above all, my leaves growing big and buds on each twig. If I were a tree, that's how I'd be. If I were a tree, I know what I'd feel. The warmth of the sun and squirrels on the run. I'd feel nests on my bark, bats hiding till dark, the climbing of boots and worms by my roots. If I were a tree, that's what I'd feel. And if I were a tree, I'd know what I'd taste. The layers of land, the soil and sand. I'd taste old buried bones and pebbles and stones and waters that flood and minerals and mud. If I were a tree, that's what I'd taste. And I will say this book is so much fun to read. It's so beautifully written, and the language sort of flows off the tongue. Like I could keep going and do the whole book very easily. But what attracted you to the project when you first got the manuscript?
Well, nature has always been my first home, I guess. It's a place where it caught my imagination from a very young age. And it's a place where I spent a lot of time by myself, even in a suburban setting. The backyard behind our house was undeveloped forest and agricultural land.
Mm-hmm.
And so having that access to a sense of space, open space, was a really valuable thing to experience. And in fact, my first job at 15 was with the Youth Conservation Corps. So I was working in a state forest, helping to manage the campground, which involved a lot of little manual labor tasks, but it still gave me a great appreciation for the park system. So this book was natural. I mean, because when I read the manuscript, like you said, it's beautiful. And I love how sensory it is. And I thought, well, this manuscript, I am the girl in this manuscript. Or I just assumed she was a girl.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it spoke to me immediately. I really wanted to see what I could do with it.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, in case there are any writers listening to this today, one of the things that spoke to me about it was, again, that same sensoriness to it, that it covers, it goes through all 5 of the senses, and then includes both things we love and things we know. And because senses are such a thing that that teachers talk about with kids, it was a book that immediately had a lot of curriculum applications in the way it uses all the senses, and also in the fact that it talks about trees, and trees are often a big unit for teachers and students. So Jing, when you were looking at this, what did you you were connected to the subject matter. How did you start to develop your ideas for uh, publishing it? Or
Well, I thought about the family, actually. I thought about the characters first and what kind of situations could I show a family in that would feel really natural, but a little bit unexpected. And so I started developing the family members off of my own family. And I think as an illustrator or writer, especially with picture books, we have a responsibility to show different situations and educate in a very subtle way about different things. So at the time, in 2017, actually, before we started this book, Barack Obama had issued a memorandum um, on encouraging diversity in national park systems. So he actually put out a memorandum where encouraging park stewards to develop programming and spaces that were more welcoming and more inclusive of a more dimensional view, the whole story of a place. So suddenly that brought to light stories of BIPOC people that may have been overlooked in the past. So we talked about, showing a BIPOC family in the space, and that felt very natural to me because my parents shared these spaces with me, and they're spaces I inhabit, on a daily basis now. And then within the family, I actually made the family all different skin colors, or 2 different skin colors, and that was important to me because there are issues of colorism. So in so many cultures, society, we are raised with this attitude that different skin colors mean different things. And this even happens within a family. And so I thought it was a great opportunity to show, that this happens within a family and it's very natural, and we can celebrate our differences even within a family. And so our daughter, when I told her about this, she was really thrilled because she's the girl in the book and the boy is the son in the book, and they're different colors.
uh-huh.
So yeah, it was a fun way to address things that are important to me.
It's a very kind of subtle diversity of like, I think of it as a sort of way of showing what is possible,
Yeah,
and making that possibility normal,
right.
and not even commenting on it necessarily, but just having it there and real as it is real every single day, and making
Right.
that visible.
That's the
Yeah.
beauty of picture books, is that we can make these issues, they're not issues, they're suddenly normalized parts of everyday life that more people, more kids can identify with, and we have this great opportunity to create stories that are more inclusive, and that's a really powerful thing. And yet it's so subtle, because it's in a way that is delightful.
Yeah.
So so there are little things, that I'm always addressing that may not necessarily, they're not going to hit someone over the head with a message,
Yeah.
but it might be a way to start a conversation, eventually, or it might feel totally natural to some families to see this family. To other readers, it might be something new, and that's a good thing too.
Yeah, both the mirrors and the windows.
Yeah.
Of children's literature.
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned both your own growing up. Like, you grew up in Pennsylvania, is that correct?
I did. I
Yeah.
grew up in central Pennsylvania.
And how did you come to be an artist and start illustrating children's books?
Well, so I think that I always knew I was an artist.
Yeah.
And I actually think that's true for a lot of people, that you might have a very instinctual feeling for who you are and what you are. But in many cases, it may be, you know, economic reasons or cultural reasons. Someone might not be encouraged to pursue those interests. So I feel like I was really lucky because my parents actually encouraged creativity on every level. So from music to, we drew as a family together after dinner. We were introduced to different music. Because I grew up in a college town, I had access to a lot of world-class exhibits and presentations. You know, it was a very unusual childhood in that respect. I know that's not true for everyone. You know, and these were all free programming. This was all free programming. And then also I had an art teacher who just happened to change schools as I matured. So I had the same art teacher from middle school all the way through high school. I want to credit him, Mr. Robert Plackey, because he actually really gave me a lot of confidence in my identity as an artist, which was so important because it was the only thing I had confidence in, you know, during those really tenuous high school years, which I know are really difficult for most kids. It doesn't matter what you're dealing with. We are all struggling with who we are. So at that time, to have such a strong sense of identity through my art, it was really a gift. So it was a haven, you know, as well as a place that I just a need to create. It was everything.
And then did you go to art school from there, or?
Yeah, so actually, even though my parents encouraged me to be creative, they didn't want me to be an artist.
Nice hobby, yeah.
So when I went to college, I studied graphic design because, you know, they were paying for my college too. They paid for college, and so they had influence over my major, and that they thought, well, graphic design, what's that? Like they had no idea, but they thought, well, at least there's a chance she can earn a living after she graduates.
She can get a steady job with a salary and health insurance, and somebody will pay her. Yeah.
Well, there was no health insurance for a long time.
Yeah.
No, but so like as a graphic designer, so I worked as a graphic designer for 20 years, but I was always using illustration. And as a graphic designer, you're constantly exploring the marriage and the dynamics of the visual and the verbal. So it was a perfect training ground for picture books. And also, you know, so I got to indulge my love of picture books through my design career because I was still dealing with the tactile qualities of paper, typography. I was always really fascinated with book binding, which is actually something I did in college. I wrote a story and printed it on a letterpress, traditional press, and hand bound it. So I have that experience of putting a physical book together and learning about the history and the craft of it. So that actually made me love books even more.
Yeah.
You know, I just love the physical presence of a book. I love that physical presence holds, you know, the energy of being shared with other people, being passed along, and living many lives, hopefully through many people. And I imagine, you know, the joy or the pleasure it brings to someone to turn a page.
They're literally ideas, you know, made solid. And
Yeah,
feelings made solid, and then we have a way to pass that along to somebody and say, like, here, experience this or think about this. It's really
yeah.
remarkable. Yeah.
It's deceptively simple and common, but each picture book is a jewel. and everyone's going to look at it from a different perspective. So every story has multiple dimensions that we may not even foresee,
Mhm.
like even as I read If I Were a Tree, I think every time I read it, there's more depth to it. Um, there's more things that are so poetic and that speak to me um, on so many levels. And as an illustrator, I'm hoping that the images I create will have the same effect.
Well, there's so many things in your illustrations, like all the little, I guess Easter eggs, you could call them almost, where you've hidden like animals or bugs or special flowers or things and all the little edges. And like every time I look at it, I'm like, oh, I'm not sure I've ever noticed that before. And, I've gone over these pages many, many times.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that that was so much fun just to think, well, what can I hide in here?
yeah.
Or and so I actually, as I was working on the book and reading the text, um, I was creating little elements separately and then kind of plopping them in the illustration on my computer so I could move it around and decide what worked and what didn't work. So on my computer, I actually have a folder of like random insects, little parts of an animal. Because I think one of the fun things is when you're out in the forest is out of the corner of your eye, you'll see something move, but you
Yeah.
won't see the whole thing. And so I like playing with those experiences that I've had in my own life.
Yeah. And you go back and forth between physical printmaking and digital collage, right? Like that was your method for you for making the art here?
Yeah. So I actually love traditional techniques, and most of my work starts with well, you can see the sketches behind me is sometimes I start creating textures and elements before I even know what I'm going to do with them.
Mhm.
So with If I Were a Tree, I think after our first conversation, I actually went on a walk right after that, and I just started collecting leaves.
Yeah.
So I have this whole collection of leaves, and I came home to my studio, and I just started making crayon rubbings, just like you would do like in first or second grade. So I have all these crayon rubbings of leaves, and they didn't make it into the final book because I decided not to go in such a realistic direction. But the fact that I was out there observing and really getting attuned to the colors and the textures and the sound and the movement, that was a necessary step. That tradition, working traditionally, that kind of led me to how I would translate the other textures and patterns digitally and collage them on with software. Um, but I feel like working digitally or working traditionally, there's always an element of surprise, no matter which method you choose. And that's part of the excitement of working on these images. Like with traditional printmaking, when you ink the block and you use the brayer on the paper and you lift that paper,
Uh-huh.
it's never, well, for me, it's never what I think it was going to be. For someone who does it professionally, maybe they are more precise.
Uh-huh.
But for me, the organic messiness of it is actually what I want. So I'm not worried about precision. And then people think of the digital process as very precise, but there's actually, it's a wonderful way to explore and riff off of things that you're creating with no commitment.
Yeah.
Because,
Control Z, Control Z, Control
oh
Z.
yeah, in my dreams, I'm going, Command Z, Command
Yeah.
Z. Yeah, so I think it's really fun to have fluidity between the two. And I couldn't work any other way, I don't think, at this point.
And I mean, just hearing you talk about the leaves, it reminded me of the back cover here. There we go. Yes,
Yes,
so we did end up incorporating your leaves in there in one
I
way.
did a little bit.
Yeah,
Yes. So that's probably the most realistic illustration in the entire book.
that's true. Yeah, yeah. Um, oh, I should say to anybody who's attending, if you have any questions for me or Jing Jing, please feel free to put them in the chat and we'll address them here at the end of the talk. What's your favorite picture in If I Were a Tree? And I
So
can bring the screen back up too.
you actually had asked me that earlier, and I thought, I like every time I look at the book, my favorite is different.
Huh?
But right now, my favorite is the one where the kids are in this, or the one before.
This one?
Yeah, so this one, I think this one is representative of a lot of things for me that aren't necessarily important to the reader or not necessarily immediate to the reader. So what's happening in this image is that there's a tree that has fallen over. And here in the Pacific Northwest, when you see that, it's most likely hundreds of years old.
Mm.
And it's fallen over just from age or from a windstorm. And then you have the layers of sediment in the background, which actually are a history of that land that's thousands of years old. So I have all these references to time. And then there's these young children where, in the scale of time, their presence in this world will be just a blip. And so it's just capturing time in the grand scale of things. And I think that's actually part of the drama of the image as I was building it. Like this image actually came to mind immediately when I read the manuscript. And then the minerals in mud, when you're outside, part of the smell of being in the woods is not just the chlorophyll and the greens and the blossoms, but the minerals have very specific smells. And I love that. I used to be a rock climber. And so, my face would be pressed against granite or sandstone.
Right.
And I just remembered those smells. And that's what I smell when I see this image. And the lichens and whatever minerals are flowing through the water and accumulating in little pockets. So this one's my favorite.
And then you built in all these lovely little animals, the raccoons over on the side and the snake and the turtle. It's really a remarkable and beautiful image. Yeah.
Oh, thanks. The turtle is actually, our daughter has a pet turtle.
Uh-huh.
So that's a little love note to our daughter.
I have to say one of my favorites maybe has the same sort of resonance is I love the camping sequence, but this one right here where where the two kids are looking at the deer. Every time I get to this image, I sort of go, oh, just because I think it captures that moment when you're looking, when you maybe catch the eye of a deer, and you're both looking at each other and wondering, like you get a sense of the strangeness of animals, like how they are not like us and how powerful that is. And I love it that it's the two children who are having this moment while their parents sort of walk on oblivious, and the adult deer run away too. I feel like I always love this image just because it gets that same wonder, I think.
Yeah, there's like maybe also there's a sense of recognition,
Yeah.
between the children and the fawn, that they're sharing this space. And then the parents walking off, I love that because when you're little and you think you're so independent and you're having this great outdoor adventure, but your parents are actually nearby, they're close enough to turn around if they need to, but to have that feeling of discovery on your own, like someone's not showing it to you. So these deer, because I live in a rural area, I actually walk through herds of deer almost every day.
Oh, wow.
And and so I often pause and just look, and we look at each other. We're curious about each other. And I like that tension in this image. So I'm glad that you felt that when you saw this image.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous piece. So, um, well, I'm just going to check and see if we have any comments here. And oh, somebody commented that, about colorism, and that it's wonderful that you consciously conscientiously try to normalize different skin tones and use that.
Oh yeah, I'm really glad. I think we're really lucky to be in a time where we're much more attuned, to inclusivity. And um, when I was a child, I remember saying to my mom, there's nothing about me. I don't want to be a princess. I am not interested in being a princess.
Mm.
And why are they all blonde haired and blue eyed? Like, not that that's wrong,
Right.
but I just didn't get it.
Yeah.
And so here we are in this just great movement of authors and illustrators and publishers and editors bringing more attention and being more sensitive to communities. And I'm just so excited for the children who will be able to find books that reflect their own experience, that normalize their experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're working hard to get more of those out there now. So
Yeah.
what are you working on next?
So right now I'm finishing up a picture book for another publisher. And actually for the past 4 years, I've been writing a graphic novel, and it's been through many revisions. There's actually a shelf in my studio that is dedicated to, so far, I stopped counting because I just can't believe how much work this is, but it's a very
Yeah.
personal project. And I am in the midst of illustrating it also. So the whole thing, 200 pages, is sketched out. But the funny thing about working on a graphic novel is that as I draw and as I input the type, the story keeps on changing because I realize, oh, well, I missed an opportunity here. Or so it really could go on forever. But I think I think that we are working towards a published date.
I mean, I will say I sometimes experience that as an editor too, is that as you go deeper and deeper, you just keep thinking like, oh, we can do this cool thing, we can do this cool thing. And at a certain point, it's
Yeah,
like, there are many, many cool things, but what is the one cool thing we need to do in this book? And let's just get that done.
right. Like each book can't be everything.
Right, right. Yeah, that is, a book doesn't need to be everything. It just needs to be the one thing that
Right,
it,
right. The one thing, like that's not, yeah, the one thing is enough.
yeah. Somebody asked, I think we have time for one quick question, like, as an editor, what's my process in visualizing the text, and how do I and the art director go about finding the right illustrator for a project? And they asked you, are there ever projects that you reject? And if so, why? I'll say for me, like, it, it's it's always kind of I can have manuscripts that I will sit with for like months and be like, who is the right illustrator for this? Have I found this person yet? And then I will be like browsing online, or I'll be in a bookstore or something, and I'll be like, that's the person, and it will all be done in a week. But I can sit up with it for a very long time ahead of that, I'm afraid. um, and what I'm always looking for, basically, like, we're almost always looking for diverse illustrators at Leon Lowe. That's often one of our #1 priorities. So I'm looking for somebody who will connect with the text from that angle, reflect the content of the book in that way, perhaps. I'm also looking for somebody who's whose spirit in the book and what I see in their art will somehow speak to what I see in the text. Like in this book, clearly we needed, with this manuscript, we needed somebody who loved trees, who felt a very deep connection to nature. And when I looked at your art, Jing Jing, I remember you had just illustrated a book about trees.
Yeah,
And I thought, should I even send this to her? But your illustrations of trees were so beautiful. And all your pictures of people out in nature were so beautiful. And I felt like the many textures and layers of your art would be a really good match for the textures and layers of the writing. And then also the language of the poem is so sort of traditional and beautiful and flowing. I like the way that your art both, it has tradition and beauty and flow, but it also has a little bit of, I don't know, spikiness to it, like in the shapes.
yeah.
And I felt like that would bring an additional layer to the text, and the way the two of them would work together. It would push the text a little bit in a
So,
way that I felt would be useful.
so that's so interesting to hear because we actually haven't talked about this before,
No, we haven't.
so I love hearing how you made that decision. And then for me, it is really hard to say no to a manuscript just because I feel like it's such an honor to be working on picture books in the first place. So I really do try to work on as many that come through the door. So why I would say turn a manuscript down is it's just not in my focus. Like as I get older, I really have an intention and be kept working with more intention on the topics that are important to me. So those are about inclusion, diversity, and the environment has always been important to me. And then sometimes it's simply because of scheduling, because I know everyone has a different work process. Some people can juggle 5 books at a time. I actually can't because my head just becomes a mess. So, so I only like to work on one picture book at a time. I can't think of anything beyond that. And so it's just a matter of what I can handle.
Yeah.
Because you invest so much of yourself into each book. Every member of the team, like as an editor, the writer, you put so much of yourself in. I just need to conserve a little bit because in order to be creative, I need to have moments of silence and space. I can't always be thinking.
Yeah.
So sometimes I have to say no.
Well, I am very grateful you said yes to this one. And again, everyone, this is If I Were a Tree by Andrea Zimmerman. It's out now, and you can find it at leonlow.com or any good bookstore near you. And thank you again, Jing, for the conversation today. It's always a
Thanks,
pleasure.
Cheryl. I love being part of this book with you all. And thank you to everyone for attending today.
Yep. All right. Have a great day, everyone, and a great weekend.
Bye.
Bye.